afternoon. Let's bring Miss Monroe in.
Your Honor, it's my understanding you want us at the podium for each time when we're addressing the court. So
Yes,
please. Yeah. Can I turn this one around?
Good afternoon. This is the matter of People of the State of Michigan versus Ashley Marie Monroe. This is file 24-11728FC, and this is the date and time set for sentencing. Counsel, will you please place your appearances on the record?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Deborah Rousseau Martinez here on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Attorney Edouard Zanian, for on behalf of Ms. Monroe. She's present to my left, as well as co-counsel Cooper Dobies from my office.
Thank you. All right, so again, this is the date and time set for sentencing in this matter. I note that back on August 13th, 2025, the defendant, Ms. Monroe, pled no contest to a series of offenses. I'll list them here briefly. They are all listed in the pre-sentence investigation report. but she pled no contest to a count 1, operating while intoxicated, causing serious injury. This has a maximum penalty of 5 years. There's a count 2, operating while intoxicated, causing serious injury. This also has a maximum penalty of 5 years incarceration. Count 3, operating while intoxicated, causing serious injury, also has a maximum penalty of 5 years and was subject to a no contest plea. Count 4, Ms. Monroe pled no contest, and it is operating while intoxicated, causing serious injury, again with a maximum penalty of 5 years incarceration. Count 5, same count, same charge with the same maximum penalty of 5 years incarceration. Count 6, same charge with a maximum penalty of 5 years incarceration. Count 7, same charge with a maximum penalty of 5 years incarceration. Count 8, operating while intoxicated, causing serious injury, same charge with a maximum penalty of 5 years incarceration. That's count 8, and then count 9 is homicide, murder, second degree, which has a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. There was a plea agreement by which the defendant, Ms. Monroe, entered her no contest plea to. That plea agreement is listed in the pre-sentence investigation report, and that report was authored by MDOC Agent Prokaska, dated September 29th, 2025. I will begin with the defense and ask, have you had the opportunity to receive and review the pre-sentence investigation report, and additionally, have you gone over it with your client, Ms. Monroe?
Your Honor, we can acknowledge receipt of the pre-sentence investigation report. In addition, my office has had the opportunity to review the report as well as review the report with Ms. Monroe.
All right, thank you. Ms. Monroe, I have a question for you, and that is, if you had questions or concerns about the content of the pre-sentence investigation report, were you able to discuss those questions or concerns, if you had any, with your counsel?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Turning to the people, Ms. Martinez, have the people had the opportunity to also receive and review that pre-sentence investigation report?
We have, Your Honor.
Thank you. From the people's standpoint, were there any changes to be made other than the sentencing date, which I will change right now on my copy to 10/15/2025? Were there any other changes that needed to be addressed in the body of the report from the people's standpoint?
Your Honor, in consideration of the additional 6 days it's been since the, 8 days it's been since the original sentencing date, the defendant is now entitled to 515 days credit versus 507 days credit.
Is there any objection to adding those additional days of credit from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. We will add those 8 days and indicate on the report that Ms. Monroe is entitled to 515 days of jail credit. Are there any other changes that need to be made to the body of the report?
Your Honor, on CFJ 284, page 8 and 9, it carries over, there is a list at the bottom of that page of the victims, and it includes their date of birth. The people would ask, and it's my understanding defense counsel has no objection to remove their dates of birth from this report due to privacy concerns.
Thank you. No objection from the defense?
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. So we would simply remove their dates of birth, all of the other evidence, names, ages, the description of the individual would remain?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. That will be, I will order that the dates of birth be removed from the report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also on CFJ 284, page 14, under consecutive sentences, that paragraph states that the prosecuting attorney general, that general needs to be removed. Obviously, we're just the prosecuting attorney.
No objection to that from the defense?
None, Your Honor.
Thank you. We will remove the word general from that statement.
There are no other changes to the body of the report.
Thank you. From the defense, were there any changes to be made to the body of the report?
Yes, Your Honor. Point the court's attention to CFJ 284, page 7, the first paragraph under recommendation narrative. It's the second line. The court will note, and it reads that the defendant made a decision to consume alcohol, get behind the wheel of the vehicle, and in turn took the lives of several people. And that should indicate 2 people. I believe that's without objection from the prosecutor.
No objection.
All right, we will change several to 2. Thank you.
Other than that, we find no additions, corrections, or deletions other than those that's been stated on the record.
All right, thank you. We will then turn to the sentencing guidelines, and I assume we can address the operating while intoxicated causing serious injury guidelines. I'm assuming that once we've agreed upon the proper guidelines for that charge, that will apply to all of those counts of that offense, correct?
Yes.
That's the people's position.
Without objection from defense, Your Honor, they're all the same offenses under the PAC code.
All right, thank you. So the prior record variable score as to the operating while intoxicated causing serious injury totals 20 points, which gives us a PRV level of C. I note that the 20 points is all accounted for in PRV 7. And then the offense variable score totals 145 points, giving us a level 6. I note that the Department of Corrections scored 25 points for OV3, 10 points for OV4, 25 points for OV9, 25 points for OV12, 25 points for OV13, 10 points for OV17, 15 points for OV18, 10 points for OV19, giving us, as stated, a total OV point score of 145, level 6, and then our guideline minimum range is calculated at 12 to 24 months. From the defense, is there any objection to the scoring or calculation of those guidelines?
No, Your Honor.
From the prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Turning to the homicide, murder second degree charge, I note that the PRV scoring remains at 20 points, level C, and the total OV scoring is scored at 275, level 3. And I note that 50 points was scored for OV3, 15 points for OV5, 25 points for OV6, OV9 was scored at 100 points, 25 points was scored for OV12, 25 points for OV13, 10 points for OV17, 15 points for OV18, again giving us a total score of 275, level 3, and the guideline minimum range was 225 to 375 to life. So was there any objection from the defense to that scoring or calculation?
No, Your Honor.
From the prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Are we ready to allocute then?
We are, Your Honor.
All right, then I will note before we do, Ms. Monroe, in determining the appropriate sentence in this case, this court must consider a number of factors, including the seriousness of the offense that you've committed, your criminal history, the statutory penalty, the cost of confinement, the sentencing guidelines, the report and recommendation of the probation department, as well as what is and what will be stated on the record today. I'm going to give your attorney the opportunity to address the court first on your behalf. Once your attorney has addressed the court on your behalf, you will also have the opportunity to address the court if you wish, followed by the prosecution, and if there are any victims here who have come to address the court, they will be invited to do so as well. So with that said, Mr. Zaney, please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just asked the court to recognize the filing of our sentencing memorandum in this case.
Yes, it has been received.
Thank you. And I know the court has reviewed that sentencing memorandum as the court commonly does. And I think what is often the challenge is to find the right words for every situation when presenting a client to the court, and I think we were best able to do that in the sentencing memorandum. I believe the sentencing memorandum, which we're going to ask the court to incorporate into its decision here today by virtue of our position, is one that takes into account all of the sentencing factors that the court should consider. I would remind the court, and I think you noted this was a no contest plea, which, as the court is aware, affects the, there's purposes for that and affects my client's ability to freely speak. And I think, though, we've captured the essence of remorse and recognition of the offense in the sentencing memorandum. At least that was our attempt. And I think we did a diligent job showing the court that. I think the sentencing memorandum, again, addresses all the sentencing factors that the court needs to take into account. And we're renewing our request for the court to accept the agreement between the prosecutor and defense in this case accordingly. And we would just rest on the fact that the information in that report has been reviewed by Ms. Monroe and is something that I think can ultimately be the best picture you can understand Ms. Monroe's situation from the time this incident occurred to coming before the court today. So without any additional magical words, Your Honor, I think the court's left with the consideration of sentencing her to the Killebrew agreement or not. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Monroe, did you wish to address the court at all today?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right. I would ask then that defense, Ms. Monroe, Mr. Brady, and Mr. Dobie be seated. I will call the prosecution up and ask if there are any individuals, any victims here who would like to address the court before the sentence.
Yes, Your Honor. At this point, we have 10 people who would like to address the court today. The first one would be Jennifer Evans.
All right, Ms. Evans, please come on up. And whenever you're ready.
My name is Jennifer. I am the mother of Annabelle and Eloise, daughter of Carolyn, aunt to Madeline and Mackenzie, cousin to Jessica, Dan, Aurora, Gabriel, Henry, Ivan, David, Monica, and Daisy, and Jonathan and Erica. Thank you, Your Honor, for the opportunity to speak today. Waukusta, Michigan is a place of magic and childhood wonder, much like that of the Tooth Fairy or the Easter Bunny. A warm nostalgia and safety that can't be captured or recreated in adulthood. Playing glitter fairies at the Waukusta Elementary's Dream Depot. The glow of Christmas lights while decorating Grandma's sugar cookies. Easter eggs filled with coins and chocolates hidden around the yard. Learning to skip rocks on the Looking Glass River and walks to the general store for Laffy Taffy, Tootsie Pops, and much to my mother's dismay, candied cigarettes. 4 generations have loved, learned, and grown here. On May 18th, we continued that tradition with our youngest generation. A walk I've taken more times than I can count, to a park that holds more memories than I can do justice. Our place of magic became a place of chaos, destruction, and death due to Miss Monroe's reckless and selfish choices. Children lost their father, wives lost their husbands, parents lost their sons, and multiple generations lost the life they had known only moments before. The damage was catastrophic, and the reach exponential, impacting family, friends, and the whole community. My first memory following the impact was the desperate need to get to my daughters, Annabelle, aged 6, and Eloise, aged 3. Only that wasn't possible due to the severity of my injuries. I spent a month to the day at Sparrow. I spent an additional 5.5 weeks at Origami's assisted living rehabilitation facility. I was separated from my daughters for nearly 10 weeks. On Friday, May 17th, I was a single mother and first grade teacher, caring for my own daughters and guiding 23 other children each day. 24 short hours later, I could not floss my own teeth, brush my own hair, or bathe. I had to learn to use the restroom, dress myself, and mobilize in a wheelchair using only one arm. I had lost the use of 3 of my limbs, lost all of my independence, and my bodily autonomy. I was left unable to care for myself, unable to care for my children, and unable to teach. The days turned to weeks, and now the weeks to months. I have not known a single day free of pain since the crash. There's no position nor piece of furniture that offers complete relief. It's difficult to accurately scale the pain you feel when it's all you've known for 515 days. There are mornings when the mere brush of fabric against my skin causes pain. I've become a human barometer, sensing changes in the atmosphere in my joints. I too was served a sentence that day. I became a prisoner first to my hospital bed, then a prisoner to my body, and now a prisoner to pain. Only my sentence was forced upon me by no fault of my own, and it's a sentence I'll carry for life without the possibility of parole in 30 years. I've had 10 surgeries and outpatient procedures as a result of this crash, repairing ligaments, bones, a nerve, and a massive Moral Lavalley lesion. I required speech therapy, vision therapy, and driver's therapy. I still weekly attend EMDR therapy, physical therapy, and occupational therapy. Physical scars are not the only reminders I carry with me of that day. I'm painfully aware of the impact this has had on my own children. They are uncertain and fearful with each new surgery. They require reassurance that I'll only be at origami for a few hours and not have to leave them to live there again. I carry with me the guilt of knowing I could not protect them from you and being unable to hold them when they needed me the most. Haunted by Annabelle's words. You were just gone, and I was all alone. 6 years old and terrified, before being loaded into the ambulance alone with her 3-year-old sister, helplessly watching as Eloise's dress was cut from her broken and battered little body. My daughters survived the unimaginable, and now had to navigate their injuries, grief, and trauma without me there to tuck them in. Not until July 17th was I able to comb and braid their hair. I missed Annabelle's kindergarten graduation and only concert of the school year. I was not there to hold Eloise when she screamed as they cut the cast from the leg that you broke. As a mother and teacher, quiet can feel foreign. Yet in assisted living, I found myself alone in my bed for quiet for hours on end, with ample time to think. I recall quite vividly an officer coming to Mary Free Bed. He had driven Miss Monroe to the courthouse himself. I asked him if she was sorry. I needed to find the humanity in her. I needed to believe she was not the monster she had become in my mind. I spent a lot of time thinking about her children as well. Much like mine, they were denied the opportunity to be held by their mother. I thought about her parents and her siblings. Their lives rattled, their generations shattered. Sorry. I wish, Miss Monroe, that you had thought about your own family that afternoon, as much as I have thought about them since. Dozens of lives would look very different today if you had. The cowardice of your no contest plea is not lost on me. To be abundantly clear, you are guilty. Not once have your eyes ever met mine. I know your face, and yet you may never know mine, but I hope you remember our voices here today. When you miss your mother and you long for her embrace, I hope you also think of my Aunt Dee, Lucy, and George, who were forced to bury their sons and will always miss the warmth of Dan and John's embrace. When you're feeling down about missing your own children's milestones, I hope you also think of the 4 children who will miss Dan at birthdays, graduations, and every other moment, big and small. When you wake uncomfortable in your prison bed, I hope you also think of the discomfort and pain so many of us carry and will continue to carry throughout our lives. And more than anything, I hope to never think of you again, though I fear that will be hard to do because my body is littered with the scars you forced upon me.
Thank you, Ms. Evans.
Thank you. Carolyn Pop.
Is it Ms. Pot? Ms. Pot?
Yes.
Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm Carolyn Pock. I'm one of the many family members who are victims of Miss Monroe's crime. I am the mom of Jennifer. I am grandma I am aunt and great aunt to the 16 who had been together with me at the park. Her actions inflicted enormous damages and losses on us. As my love for my family and empathy for each member is such an integral part of my identity, it has been hard to compose this letter. The tragedy is so vast. In particular to myself, I have been injured both physically and psychologically. Almost everything that was our normal lives was immediately changed. The physical impacts I suffered were primarily to my head and my shoulder. The visible evidence of damages are a small scar on my right hand ring finger and a long scar through my right eyebrow. One of the things that is not visible yet remains is the damage to some of the tendons in my right shoulder. Nor do you see the facial nerve damage and the damage to my visual, vestibular, and neurological systems. These injuries still impact my daily life. I remain in the care of doctors and specialists who work toward helping me regain my pre-injury abilities and health. This crime has caused me psychological and emotional injury, which for me has been more painful than the physical injuries. I did seek out mental health help from professionals, and I do remain in care today. The sadness, confusion, anger, and grief have been huge. How couldn't it be anything but horrible? One moment, I was enjoying time with 16 other family members at a favorite place since my childhood, and within seconds, Miss Monroe's actions caused this mass casualty and the deaths of John and Dan. It is grief of their deaths. It is the trauma of what I did see, hear, and experience on the Hill, and the flashbacks of that. Much of that was in my testimony back in December. It is the heartache that she caused to all the children and the adults in our large 4 generations of family. The loss of Dan and John is the hardest part of this tragedy. At the same time, I know it is even more grievous for their closest family, their wives, their children, their parents, their siblings. As I try to work toward healing, I hold on to happy memories of John and Dan from earlier that year and on the day of this tragedy. I think of Jonathan's smile and how he reminded me of his dad, my brother Roger, and he reminded me of my dad, his grandpa. I see John and Erica at their wedding reception and the joy for them that was shared by many present just in January of 2024. At our last gathering, I heard him tell my brother how good married life is. I see him joking around to entertain my granddaughter, and she's laughing at him. I will remember his kindness, his caring, his help and love to others. I think of Dan and his love for Jessica and their family. I appreciate his hope in God and new beginnings. I think of his kindness and creativity. I am grateful to have heard Dan and the boys sing and play guitar at a family gathering earlier that spring. On the day of the tragedy, I enjoyed his warm bear hug and the kiss on the cheek as I greeted him. I will forever miss my nephews. Our lives are forever changed. Every day, we live with the losses and the damages of this tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pop.
Andrew Seisel, President of IAFF Local 22058. 258, sorry.
you. I know, would you please, before you begin your statement, would you please state and spell your name, just for our record, please?
Sure. Andrew Tiefel, T as in Tom, I-E, F like Frankie L.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Your Honor, please allow me some leeway as to the length of this statement. The three reasons for this are as follows. So that Jonathan Allen Esch's brothers and sisters are given ample opportunity to address this honorable court. Also, individually, submitting over 100 impact statements would be too overwhelming. However, the impact to our collective group is quite significant, and also to impress upon this court the significance of this murderer's actions. As this court is aware, our brother and his brother-in-law were murdered by the defendant sitting in this courtroom. We refuse to use this murderer's name because once this court gives a sentence, the defendant will have the same significance in our lives as that of its own family. First, we must impress upon this court that it was John's co-workers and brothers of Local 2258 who responded to the murder scene and attended to John's family. His brothers kept their composure, and his brothers kept their composure as John and John's brother-in-law, Dan, lay deceased in their direct line of sight. These men treated and transported a serious injured member of our brother John and Dan's family. From the fire chief to the newest member, this murder impacted our fire department. The fire department was also significantly impacted because we were robbed of John's presence, expertise, and love of patients. John was with us for 3 years and 10 months. During this time, he made his presence known by the lives he saved, fires that he fought, and his unyielding empathy and support for those who suffered from mental health, substance abuse, domestic violence, and the like. John spearheaded on his own a resource book which is still being used in the Tri-County area today. It is impossible to comprehend how much positive change John could have made in his career with us. This murderer took away someone who was completely devoted to helping people. The fact is that John would have moved heaven and earth to give this murderer the help it needed. So how does one quantify a person's potential when their hopes and dreams are taken so soon? We don't think it's possible, and trying just doesn't seem the right thing to do. We know in our hearts that John would have impacted hundreds, if not thousands, of people with his love, care, and genuine concern for all people. It is safe to say that his true passion were his wife, family, and helping those who are suffering. Secondly, we must impress upon this court that many brothers and sister firefighters from different departments treated and or transported 12 other critically or severely injured family members. Each and every one of them should be commended for their actions. We must also add that police officers, sheriff deputies, state police officers, emergency medical service providers, emergency medical examiners, fire chiefs, and many more were on scene. They either treated John and Dan's family members or made sure that the scene was processed professionally so that this murderer could be in front of you today. They did this all while John and Dan lay deceased in their direct line of sight. Every person involved were absolute professionals, and we are humbly grateful. They all were impacted by this murder. Finally, we need to impress upon this court that the emergency room technicians, x-ray technicians, nurses, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, physicians, coroner technicians, coroners, and security at both Sparrow Emergency Department and McLaren Emergency Department were all impacted directly by this murder. Many are under the belief that those of us in these chosen professions have some sort of superpower to not feel or be affected by the carnage that these type of selfish creatures create. Many people believe that we signed up for this job, so deal with it. However, both are not the case. Every single call that involves this type of death and destruction, this murder in front of you, wantonly committed, affects every person who touches this to their very core. This murder did in fact, without any care or concern for itself, its unborn child, its children, its spouse, its family, John and Dan's families, and all the professionals listed above, did by its actions, purposefully and without remorse, put chemicals in its body and that of its unborn child, which altered its mind and physical abilities. Caused total and complete mayhem, destruction, and irreversible injuries. Destroyed the lives of its children, spouse, and family. Murdered Jonathan Allen Esch. Murdered Daniel George Harris. Emotionally and mentally scarred over 100 professionals by its actions. Crushed the hopes and dreams of a newlywed. Crushed the hopes and dreams of another man's loving and devoted wife. Crushed the hopes and dreams of a man's children. Crushed a mother's soul who has seen too much pain and suffering for one person. Catastrophically devastated the murder victim's siblings. Caused irreparable generational damage. However, none of this is what our brother would have wanted for any of us. What he would have wanted us is what we have done and continue to do. Our brother's family has now become our family. We watch out for them. We reach out to them. We share time with them. We will not allow this to dictate our future, nor how we live our lives. We will honor John by continuing to treat patients as though they were our own family. We will never forget his legacy and the example of what a firefighter should be. Most importantly, we will not be victims to this murderer's actions. We will flourish and prosper as we always have under extreme circumstances. So what can I say about John that has not already been said by so many? Although this court deserves to hear what we deeply feel about our brother John, this murderer in front of you does not. So we will be silent on this matter. We will be as silent as this murderer's pleas for help in the darkness of its cell. We will be unyielding in our silence, as the unyielding loneliness that awaits this murderer when it's forgotten by its children, spouse, family, and friends. Our silence will be as eternal as the self-hate and self-loathing that this murderer is and will experience. Finally, our silence on this matter will be as crushing as the seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, years, decades, missed birthdays, missed anniversaries, missed funerals, missed weddings, missed births of grandchildren, missed intimate moments, missed hugs, missed touches, missed first words, missed first steps, missed proms, missed homecomings, and missed opportunities for forgiveness. We also would like to extend our eternal thanks and gratitude to our fire chief, Todd Allen Hendy, our fellow union brothers and sisters, the Esch, Glatz, and Harris families. In your own grief, you wrapped your protective arms around our local, and this has continued ever since. We are closer than ever, and nothing will break these bonds that we have formed. Finally, I was asked to share this with you. See, last night I asked one of my brothers if the statement was a little bit too much. And he said, "Is that a joke? She willfully got behind a wheel and murdered 2 people and left the scene hoping not to get found and not take responsibility. She ruined generations of beautiful people who lost what John would have given them. This, can't say it, tore a family and a fire department apart and deserves to rot." Your Honor, we thank you for your time and we appreciate this opportunity to be heard.
Thank you, Captain Tufel.
Thank you.
Erica Glatz.
Right. Thank you. Ms. Glatz, whenever you're ready.
Ashley, this date marks the end of your power over our healing and will be the last time I have to think about you for at least the next 30 years. As we read our statements today, I ask you to remember this. While you may feel a flicker of empathy for a moment, maybe even a few days, these are the realities we are sentenced to live with every single day for the rest of our lives because of what you have done. I will try to keep my statement fairly short today, not for your sake, Ashley, but for the sake of making sure all our voices are heard. We have a limited amount of time, and there are far too many victims that deserve to be heard. Ashley, your decision to drink and drive destroyed many lives and prematurely ended 2. Your actions killed my husband, John, and my brother-in-law, Dan. 2 incredible men, 2 people who were loved, 2 lives that mattered, 2 humans that deserve so much better than the fate you gave them. Gone because of you. John was a firefighter and a paramedic, someone who devoted his life to saving others, to running towards danger when others ran away. John was a wonderful provider to all of his patients, but he took a special interest in caring for medically vulnerable patients. These included patients experiencing home and food insecurities, those suffering with mental health ailments, and patients with substance use disorder. These are the patients that are all too often given up on by the medical community. They are often assumed to be lazy or unwilling to improve their current situation. Almost after every shift, John would come home and tell me about a conversation he had with one of these patients. Not a medical conversation, but a human conversation. He knew that taking the extra time to ensure these patients felt seen and valued would improve their trust in the medical system and hopefully support them towards healing. There was one patient in particular that was well known to the department. He suffered from home insecurity and substance abuse. Every time John was on a call involving this patient, he would sit and talk with him about life. He didn't interrogate him on why he relapsed or scold him on not complying with treatment plans. Eventually, it was John who convinced him to check into rehab after decades of substance use. He saw patients as people and believed that everyone deserved to be treated with respect and dignity. And yet, just months later, it was a drunk driver who took everything from him. It was a drunk driver who drove away, leaving him lifeless on the side of the road. Where was the respect and dignity that John deserved? My husband was everything to me. He wasn't just my partner, he was also my best friend, my future. He was an incredible musician, a talented cook, and had the biggest heart, especially when it came to animals. He often spent hours out exploring the woods with our dog, dressed in matching bandanas. They would overturn rocks and stumps, looking for mushrooms and cool bugs. Our dog absolutely adored John. They were each other's best friends. After John's passing, our dog would still run to the window at the sound of the garage door, tail wagging, waiting for his dad to come home so they could go on one more adventure. Because of you, Ashley, he never did. Working in the medical field myself, I know good people can make horrible mistakes. I can understand and empathize with someone who has made a mistake. But Ashley, this was not a mistake. This was a series of selfish, deliberate choices. You chose to drink while pregnant. You chose to drive. And perhaps most vile of all, you chose to run over an entire family and then flee. You hit us and kept going. You didn't check if anyone was alive. You didn't call for help. You left John, you left Dan, and you left my family in your wreckage. I'm haunted every single day by the memories of that moment. At night when I try to fall asleep, I relive it all. The screams of children, their pleading voices asking me to tell them it wasn't real. I see my sister-in-law with terror in her eyes trying to perform CPR despite her own injuries. I feel my throat getting dry from screaming John's name. Again and again, hoping that if I screamed loud enough, he might wake up, but he never did. The days are no easier. I live with daily flashbacks. I feel the broken pieces of my leg grinding together, just like they did when I used my arm as a splint that day. Sometimes I think I see John in a crowd, and then just as quickly, I see his face lying lifeless in the morgue. This is the reality you've created for me. These are just a few of the haunting memories I'm left to carry, but you, Ashley, don't have to. You had the privilege of driving away. We didn't. No amount of alcohol can justify abandoning people you just mutilated or murdered. This was not intoxication, this was inhumanity. As for your consequences, your prison sentence is merciful compared to the lifetime of suffering you forced upon all of us. You may eventually walk free. We, however, will never be free from what you've done. Our loss will span decades, lifetimes, and generations. Ashley, you made me a 28-year-old widow. In a bed John and I once shared, I wake up alone. In a home once filled with his laughter, I come home to silence. I live with the memories of the life we once had, and the now empty space where it used to be. We had dreams of starting a family. John wanted nothing more in this life than to become a father. He talked often about adventures he would take our future kids on, and we would both nervously laugh, knowing they would likely have his dangerous combination of intelligence, energy, and curiosity. Ashley, not only did you take this dream away from John, but you took away my chance to watch him become the father he deserved to be. Even after your selfish decisions to intentionally endanger your own child, you still got the chance to bring life into this world. John will never get that, and he deserves so much better than the fate you dealt him. I'm not here to seek vengeance, but I am here to hold you accountable. Nothing that happens in or out of this courtroom will bring John and Dan back. But I needed you to hear my voice and know what your decision cost me, what it cost John and Dan and everyone who loved them. Ashley, while I carry this loss with me every single day, I hope you carry the truth of what you did for the rest of yours. May prison treat you with the same level of kindness that you have shown the people you left for dead. I ask this court to impose a maximum sentence. Due to the level of physical and emotional turmoil Ashley has left our family to carry, even after the day she destroyed and ended lives, she has inflicted more anxiety and pain through her legal decisions. She has shown that her selfishness was not a one-off, but is a core part of her personality. She has shown absolutely no remorse for the pain she has caused us. She does not feel sorry for us, but she certainly does feel bad for herself. How someone remains so self-centered after causing the amount of pain to others is beyond me. But I do know that this type of person will only cause more pain to others if given the chance. Keeping her behind bars is what is best for her children, my family, and the safety of our entire society. While she begins her sentence, our family will finally be given the chance at a new chapter, one focused on healing, honoring our loved ones, and rebuilding a future in their memory. We will move forward with the strength, love, and compassion that John and Dan lived by every day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Dee Esch, who's the mother of multiple victims.
Mrs. Ash, whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Dee Esch, and I am the mother of Jonathan Esch and mother-in-law to Dan Harris. Mother to Jessica Harris, grandmother to Aurora, Gabe, Henry, and Ivan. Mother to David Esch, mother-in-law to Monica Fabrice, and grandmother to Daisy Esch. And I am also the mother-in-law to Erica Glatz. I am also a sister-in-law, an aunt, a great-aunt to others that were involved in this crash, the crash that caused the deaths of John and Dan. Ashley, when you smashed into my son Jonathan with your car, you fractured both his lower legs, including his left ankle. Ashley, you shattered both sides of his skull, the sides and the back, which led to a brain bleed. Jonathan also had a hinge fracture, which means part of the skull broke off but was still attached at one place. So essentially it could swing back and forth like a door. This also caused a brain bleed. Ashley, you broke Jonathan's pelvis on both sides, and there was a fracture on the piece of bone that connects to both sides of the pelvis. Basically, Ashley, you broke the bone under the groin. Ashley, you caused pulmonary contusions, which is a high impact trauma on the lungs, sort of like a concussion on the lungs. Also, Ashley, you caused many scrapes, cuts, and bruises all over John's entire body. Ashley, your selfish, irresponsible, negligent actions caused all of this that day that you decided to drink and drive. Jonathan was an amazing person. He loves his family, he loved his friends deeply, and he also loved animals. Jonathan was kind, funny, cared for others. He decided to become a firefighter paramedic when his father passed away because he wanted to help people the way we were helped the day his father died. Jonathan was only 30 years old when you killed him, Ashley. Oh, not killed him, you murdered him. Let's get that straight. He had only been married to his wife Erica for 5 months. They planned on having children. Ashley, because of you, I don't get those grandchildren. Because of you, Ashley, I don't get any more Christmases, Thanksgivings, birthdays, no more holidays, period. I miss Jonathan's smile. I miss Jonathan's laugh. I miss his hugs. I miss him stopping over for a hug. I miss the sound of his voice just saying, "Hi, Mama," and "I love you, Mama." Because of you, Ashley, I will never hear it's a boy or it's a girl, Mama. Ashley, because of you, all I can do is dream about Jonathan. And in those dreams, all I can do is try and hug him, and every time he turns and disappears. Ashley Monroe, you are a murderer. You murdered my son Jonathan by your willful disregard for human life. You knew it could happen when you drove drunk, but you didn't care. You didn't even care about the life you grew inside you. You drank alcohol, put the keys in your car, and drove until you were stopped. But only after you irrevocably changed my family's life forever. Make no mistake, what you did was murder. You are a murderer. One day you will walk out of prison. My sentence only ends when I meet my son in heaven. Now I'd like to talk about Daniel Harris. When you murdered Daniel Harris, you murdered the father, a son to a father. You murdered a wife's husband. You murdered the kid's pops. You murdered a son-in-law to a mother-in-law. You murdered a brother's brother. You murdered a brother-in-law. You murdered an uncle to nieces and nephews. You murdered a nephew to aunts and uncles. You murdered a cousin of cousins, and you murdered a friend of many friends. Sorry, I forgot one thing that I need to add. When you murdered Jonathan, you murdered a mother's husband. You murdered a wife's husband. You murdered a son-in-law to a father and a mother. You murdered a sister's brother. You murdered a brother's brother. You murdered a brother-in-law's brother. You murdered an uncle to aunts and nieces, or nieces and nephews. You murdered a grandmother's grandson. You murdered a nephew to aunts and uncles. You murdered a cousin of cousins, and you murdered a friend of many friends. When you smashed your car into Dan, you fractured the bone in his lower right leg. Ashley, you broke. That she lowered. She broke both his ribs. Did I read that? Ashley, I need to go back. Ashley, when you smashed your car into Jonathan, you fractured both his lower legs, including his left ankle. You fractured both sides of his skull, including the front and the back, which went to a brain bleed. Did I already read this?
I believe you did, yes.
Okay, I will go on with Dan then. I apologize.
Not a problem.
When you smashed your car into Dan, you fractured the bone in his lower right leg. Ashley, you broke 6 of Dan's ribs. Ashley, you completely broke Dan's T9 vertebrae, which is a bone in his mid-back, and with that, Ashley, you severed a major artery. Ashley, you fractured Dan's pelvis and also had multiple pelvic fractures. Ashley, you fractured Dan's skull, causing a brain bleed. Ashley, you hit Dan so hard that you separated the base of his skull from the top of his spine, which caused his brainstem to rupture. Ashley, you also caused pulmonary contusions. His lungs were bleeding. Dan also had bleeding in his chest cavity. Ashley, once again, you, with your selfish, irresponsible, negligent actions, caused all of this that day that you decided to drink and drive. Dan Harris was a warm, loving, caring, funny person. Dan was an excellent husband and friend to my daughter Jessica, and an excellent pops to his children, Aurora, Gabe, Henry, and Ivan, and an amazing son-in-law to me. Dan was only 42 years old when you murdered him. Dan was an extremely likable person you could talk to about anything. He was always there to listen, never too busy to lend a hand, and always ready with a great hug. Dan was a talented artist, both with a pen and a guitar. Dan and Jessica were looking forward to life in their new home. Dan ran his own graphic design business, and Jessica was a stay-at-home mom who homeschooled her kids. Once again, because of you, Ashley, we don't get any more Christmases, Thanksgivings, birthdays, any type of holiday or celebration with Dan ever again. I will miss his laughter, his smile, his playing the guitar, and going to listening to him sing karaoke, and I miss his hugs. Ashley Monroe, on May 18, 2024, you murdered Dan Harris. Once again, you drank alcohol, put the keys in the car, and started it, and drove drunk. No, make no mistake, again, this was murder. You are a murderer. Now I'd like to talk about my daughter, Jessica Harris. When I first saw Jessica, she was being brought up over the guardrail on a gurney, covered in blood from head to toe. She ended up on life support for 3 days. It was at least 1 month before Jessica came home the first time. For the next 10 months, I lived with my daughter and her 4 children. Jessica was in and out of the hospital for the next 9 months with 9 surgeries trying to save her leg. She had 12 broken bones altogether, Ashley. Finally, in February of 2025, they had to amputate her leg from the mid-knee down. It's been extremely difficult watching her learn to walk again and suffering from the phantom pain. But she is a strong, independent woman, and she will persevere. Ashley, you also injured my grandchildren. Aurora, 16, had 8 stitches in her upper thigh and a severe concussion. Henry, 7 years old, had a concussion. And Ivan, 3 years old, had a fractured hip and scrapes all over his face. Gabe, 14, was walking ahead of the group and turned around to witness Miss Monroe driving away from this crash with her hand over her mouth. He ran over and witnessed his family members strewn all over first finding his little brother Ivan to the side of the road. This has also impacted my son David Esch and his wife Monica and their daughter Daisy. Physically, David broke a rib and Monica hurt her tailbone and her nose. Luckily, Daisy only had a few scrapes and bruises. Mentally, David now suffers from PTSD, nightmares, and survivor's guilt. Monica suffers from nightmares, and Daisy also suffers from nightmares. David, Monica, and Daisy were on their way to moving to Germany, and that had to be put on hold for a while we had the funerals for Jonathan and Dan. What should have been an exciting time began with, and still is, filled with anxiety, nightmares, and misplaced guilt. This is just some of what we have been through, and we have a lot more ahead of us. We will continue to mourn the deaths of Jonathan and Dan for the rest of our lives. This is only one story of one family of many families that Ashley Monroe has impacted through her selfish, irresponsible, and negligent actions. There is the Pock family, the Evans family, the Olmsted family, the Hanlon family, the Esch family, and the Glatz family. Ashley, your sentence could end in 30 years. We, on the other hand, have a life sentence.
Thank you, Mrs. Ash.
Your Honor, the next statement will be over Zoom. Monica Babis.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you.
Okay. My name is Monica Fabis. I am mom to Daisy, wife to David. I'm a proud military veteran with a long career in national security. My mission in life has always been to protect those around me and to serve my community. 2 concepts that are clearly lost on Miss Monroe. I am one of Miss Monroe's victims, and for a long time I wanted to look Miss Monroe in the eye, to be face to face for the first time since she hit us. But I understand now that closure cannot be found in crocodile tears. Still, I am here to explain some of the damage she has inflicted in hopes of eliciting any morsel of remorse. My daughter Daisy was only 2 years old when Miss Monroe drove into us. Aside from my personal pain, which I will certainly cover, it would be a disservice as her mother not to describe the most painful moments of this experience to the court. 2-year-olds have almost no concept of safety or lack thereof. In fact, it isn't until primary school years that a child can ostensibly identify an emergency or threat to life. Daisy has a stuffed elephant named Ellie that she brings everywhere with her. When she was 2, Daisy treated Ellie almost as an extension of herself. Whatever Daisy wanted or needed, it was always Ellie asking for it. This brings me to the moment that haunts me each day out of concern for my child. After what seemed like an eternity of checking pulses, making compressions, comforting children, I came to where my daughter was sitting with her lesser injured cousins. Her tiny face, twisted in fear and confusion, looked to mine for answers as she asked me, "Mama, did Ellie get run over too? Is Ellie gone?" This 2-year-old had just watched her uncle pronounced dead on the scene and her mother struggled to fail to save the other. She saw her aunt's internal bodily workings exposed to the elements in such a sickeningly detailed display, only highlighted by the light of day. She saw her cousins failing to get back up. She saw blood and bones and violence to an incomprehensible degree. We as adults struggled to understand what we saw that day. Imagine what that could do to someone whose brain is only developing. Someone who, until that moment, had no concept of what our bodies held inside or the level of danger we were in. Someone who had absolutely zero concept of death. In the aftermath, I began to notice signs of PTSD in my child. To illustrate how absolutely ludicrous that reality was, understand that we sought out and were turned away from pediatric mental health care providers who stated she was simply too young to treat, and they would not know what to do with her. It wasn't until a close family friend, a therapist herself, recommended the person that would end up our own personal angel in this dark period. Leah Young at River Grove Therapy near Washington, D.C. decided to give us a chance. She told us that Daisy will have been and will likely continue to be her youngest patient ever. Miss Leah, as Daisy called her, helped her understand safety again and find rest. The night terrors downgraded to nightmares. Still, the villain in Daisy's story remains. Daisy frames the world in terms she can understand. Any child does. To a child, someone who harms others to the degree that Miss Monroe harmed us is a villain. As such, Daisy refers to her, even today, as the bad lady. The only thing that helped Daisy sleep most nights was the idea that the bad lady couldn't come for us anymore because she was in jail. An absurd thing to have to do, by the way, is to explain to a 2-year-old the concept of jail, but such was my reality at the time. Even today, Daisy asks where the bad lady is and if she's still in jail. She only feels safe knowing that the bad lady is not allowed to be outside. Daisy's 3rd birthday came while we buried our dead. Her father, David, needed to be there at the funerals, especially considering the level of incapacitation his sister Jessie was in. So we made the painful decision to stay apart for the birthday. Wanting some normalcy for her, I struggled greatly to salvage what I could of what was supposed to be an exciting day for Daisy and her friends at Chuck E. Cheese. And they had to move to the party at the last minute. My daughter only had a small handful of children show up. A fellow mom came early to help me set up in silence as tears rolled down my face, watching my daughter feeling scared and missing her father on such a birthday. My elderly mother flew in from Europe at great financial and physical cost to help us during this time, because being an effective parent felt impossible. Everything felt like a failure that day, despite my and my mother's best efforts. And this brings me to myself. I am no longer the person I was. I struggle now to find my way through life. I struggle to understand the meaning of happiness. I struggle to make and maintain human connection. I struggle to want to be alive. Other than the obvious financial costs that Miss Monroe has imposed on me through her actions, I suffer a loss much more precious. It's my will to find joy in life. At the hospital that day, my very kind nurse helped me clean Dan's blood from my face and gave me a change of clothes so that I wouldn't scare my daughter when I could finally be reunited with her. He also gave me a toothbrush, toothpaste, and mouthwash, the things I was most desperate for that he somehow divined without my saying so. When I was giving Dan CPR, his blood had squirted into my mouth and hit me in the throat. It trickled down my face and all over my front, and it was all I could smell or taste. so I scrubbed and I brushed. And I did it again and again. And no matter what I did for the next few weeks, all I could taste was his blood. I drew my own blood, brushing and flossing and rinsing to a manic level. Still, only Dan's blood. Every meal I choked down, every cup of coffee for those days immediately following, it was just Dan's blood. I should know that my phone was lost on impact. It took me weeks to recover it, and out of sheer luck and kindness of some stranger who turned it in. I was in a town I knew nothing about, alone, with a traumatized 2-year-old marooned in a hotel with no outside connection. I thought endlessly about Ivan, Henry, Gabe, and Aurora. I knew they were feeling lost and scared without a parent nearby to help. I wondered if Dave and I would soon be their parent figures. I held hope for Jessie, wondering if she was going to make it. For Jen and her sweet girls, wondering if they would soon be without their mother. I was worried for Melissa's girls, wondering what kind of bravery must have been instilled in them to react quickly the way they did. I worried for Aunt Carolyn, who had just saved her grandbabies at cost of her own well-being in a moment of quick thinking. I imagined Erica's anguish and replayed in my head over and over her asking, "Dave, is John dead?" I couldn't stop thinking about Dee, my mother-in-law, calling Dan's mother from the hospital to tell her the news. I couldn't stop thinking and tasting Dan's blood and smelling the most putrid combination of blood and grass. I was caught in a spiral that no one helped me out of, one out of which I'm still struggling to climb. Each night, to this day, and I mean it to this day, I see Dan's face. I see the light leaving his eyes. I see confusion and pain painted across him simultaneously. It's become my nightly ritual, almost as if he is haunting me. I've even started telling him goodnight. My husband David and I are now separated. Navigating this horrific event has put an especially difficult strain on our marriage. We grew resentful of each other in the aftermath, when really, it is Miss Monroe who deserves the resentment. I resent her for the fear I feel walking along sidewalks when cars zip by. I resent her for the anxiety I have sending my daughter to school, where I might not be able to save her if a car veers into her without warning. I resent her for throwing my life off course and causing all of this pain. I resent her for impacting my mental stamina at work and causing me to no longer be the best of the best, fearful that I may be fired at any moment. I resent her for the medication I have to be on just to get me through each day. I resent her, and I will continue to resent her. The truth is, a person who gets behind the wheel drunk is not made overnight. A person who flees the scene of their own crime is not made overnight. Miss Monroe, just like any of us, is the sum of her choices in life. Each day that she morally compromised herself brought her one day closer to the person sitting in this courtroom. This was not some freak accident. This was hundreds of Miss Monroe's choices that culminated in what turned out to be the worst day of my life. I understand that Miss Monroe is the mother herself. I strongly believe, as one mother to another, that there is no maternal bone in Miss Monroe's body, because if there were, she would never have acted so recklessly. I also believe there is no humanity in this woman. To be as selfish as she has been for so long, I believe with every fiber of my being that she would do it again. Because of this, I believe Miss Monroe has no place in society. She is a proven danger, and we must protect our most vulnerable from people like her. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fabice.
Next will be David Esch.
Thank you.
Mr. Esch, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, Judge Barkman. My name is David Esch. I am a dad, a husband, a brother, a son, a cousin, a nephew, and an uncle to an amazing extended family, many of whom are in the courtroom today, and some of whom are no longer with us. Ask anyone who knows them and they'll tell you that the extended Esch family is full of some of the most thoughtful and kind people you've ever met. I don't exactly feel like I fit that mold anymore, but someone needs to be the jerk in the room for them sometimes. Many of my extended family members and I were struck by Ashley Monroe while leaving the park in May of last year. Ms. Monroe killed my brother, John Esch, and my brother-in-law, Dan Harris. She fled the scene, and she left a whole extended family traumatized and scarred. I want to thank you, Your Honor, for allowing me to speak today. Some in the courtroom might be surprised to see me giving a statement virtually today. I had fully planned on attending in person on the 7th when we were originally scheduled to do the sentencing hearing. I had made travel arrangements, got a flight, hotel, rental car, the whole 9 yards. And then Ms. Monroe decided at the 11th hour that she wanted to take back her no contest pleas. And as a result, I am no longer able to accommodate being in Michigan right now for this hearing. I can't be in the room sharing the space with my extended family. I can't feel some of their warm hugs. But it's honestly not a total loss. I feel like right now this gives me the chance to take back some semblance of control over my life from Ms. Monroe. For the last year and a half, I have felt like I've been defined by this event. I'm not the person that I was before. I'm not the goofy fun guy at work. I'm not Mr. Dependable. I'm the guy who was hit by a car, lost his family members, and am now feeling guilty over it. So starting today, I'm going to do my best to no longer be defined by this event. I am not as interested in speaking on punishment for the defendant. I think 30 years is fine. I don't think it's great. I think more time would be appropriate. Dan doesn't get to see his kids grow up. John doesn't get to visit me in Germany, where me and my family moved. Ms. Monroe doesn't get to travel. She doesn't get to see her kids grow up. It's fine. What I am a little bit more interested in is something that my daughter brought up. First, a little bit about her. My daughter, Daisy Esch, is 4 years old. She was 2 at the time that Ms. Monroe hit us with her car. And she was in my arms when we were hit. And the fact that we came away as a family unit, all having walked away, I feel like is nothing short of a miracle. By my estimate, we went about 15 feet from where we were standing to where we landed. And she only had a few scrapes and bruises. She wasn't unscathed, however. She suffers from nightmares still. She rarely sleeps alone. She still tenses up when we're near traffic. And she is not quite as independent as she was before. Ms. Monroe gave that little girl PTSD, anxiety, chronic nightmares, and grief before she even turned 3. I asked Daisy what she would like to say to Ms. Monroe if we could talk to her, or the bad thing. I got a very concise answer. Daisy said, "That lady should say sorry to us," and I wholeheartedly agree. The thing is that I don't think that people can truly be sorry for what they've done until they've taken the time to understand the full extent of the damage. What we are getting right now with my family here at the sentencing hearing, everybody getting about 10 minutes, I'm sure it's barely scratching the surface. I think if Miss Monroe ever has any interest in atoning, doing what's right, making amends, the place she needs to start is giving her victims the space to have their real say. If she wants to know more about John, about Dan, about my experiences, about Daisy's experiences, I would like Ms. Monroe to know that my door is open. I will happily sit down with you and tell you everything. Because what you're getting today is nothing compared to what our realities have been. That is with the caveat that I don't think Ms. Monroe is the type of person to do that. Just based on what we've seen from her character so far, pleads and attempting to withdraw her plea at the 11th hour, drinking and driving in the first place, continuing to drive despite showing clear signs of impairment. I really don't ever expect to hear from Ms. Monroe. I don't expect her to ever be interested in knowing what kind of person John was when he was a kid, or the plans that we had made that we never get to see through. So I would like to, at the very least right now, for my sake, so that I can feel a little heard, talk about some of the things that are keeping me up at night. After Daisy and I landed in the grass nearby, we were struck unconscious. The first thing I remember when I came to was seeing my wife attempting triage on my brother-in-law Dan. I saw a look of fear and panic and desperation in her eyes that I had never seen on anyone before. And I know I will never forget that face. I didn't know what to do. I was disoriented, confused, and scared. So I started coaching myself. The first thing I said was, stand up, find John. John will know what to do. He can tell you what to do so that you can help. I turned around and I saw my little brother splayed out in the grass, lying still. I couldn't even go check on him. I assumed he was dead, but I couldn't bring myself to check. At this time, I still had Daisy in my arms. She was in my arms when we were hit. She was in my arms at this time, and she would still be in my arms for the next 5-6 hours. I felt like I couldn't take her close to her uncle like that. I felt like she couldn't see that. I had to protect her from it. Something just told me I had to, but I wanted to check on John. It killed me for months to feel like I didn't do everything that I could to help him that day. My sister Jessie was laying in the grass nearby. She had a gaping wound and her head was already swelling. I had no idea if she was alive or dead, and again, I couldn't bring myself to do anything to check on her. The only thing I felt like I could do was just console the kids. So I walked over to that part of the hill where Melissa's children were sitting, where Henry was sitting, and I did my best to just comfort them, because it's all I felt like I had in me. It was at that time that Daisy asked for her stuffed elephant. She had left her at my grandmother's house up the road, but in her confused state, she thought she had brought her, and she thought that she was hit by the car. She said, was Ellie hit by the car? Is Ellie okay? And it was the only thing she could do to wrap her mind around it. So remember Erica, the look in her eyes as she cradled her twisted leg and asked point blank if my brother was dead. I told her that I thought he was, and I tried to go check on him again. I got several feet from him and froze once again, powerless to do anything. I knew even in that moment, I felt that he was gone, and I knew how senseless it was. just sudden and senseless and pointless. To have his life ended so soon. He was doing so much good. He had just gotten married. We had made plans. We were gonna go check out his house the next day. He was gonna come to Germany to visit. After that, we loaded up into ambulances. The kids outnumbered the adults, so we had to split everybody up. I went with Daisy, Dave and Henry in one ambulance. Monica went with Aurora, and it was in the ambulance that I finally had a chance to call my mom and to make sure that somebody was with Ivan, but I had to tell her that John was dead. And that I was pretty sure Dan was dead, and I had no idea if Jesse was alive still. We found out later that night that Jesse was in critical condition, and Monica and I talked right then and there about what we were going to do. We had agreed that we were going to quit our jobs and move to Michigan and do everything we could to be there for those kids. And that's a conversation I never thought I could have. Nobody should ever have to have. After getting discharged very early the next morning, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the impact of the car. I heard Monica's yelp. I felt the vibrations in my entire body, and I heard the sound. I heard the screams. I saw Dan as he was beginning to pass. That feeling of powerlessness, knowing that a stranger can come along at any moment and do that to your family and make no mistake, it's not lost on me that Daisy and I could have died. The difference between life and death for me and that little girl that you're seeing on that screen was a couple feet left or right. We could have been killed. That sense of powerlessness doesn't go away. That feeling of frustration that you can't protect your kids doesn't leave. I broke the news to my niece and oldest nephew the next morning. I had to let them know their papa and Uncle John were dead, and nothing can prepare you for that. When Jessie was awake and extubated, I broke the news to her too. She was in literal disbelief, disoriented, and furious. And I hate that Miss Monroe made me do that. But I didn't want Jessie to hear it from anybody else. I cried myself to sleep nearly every night for weeks from the pain of the broken rib. All things considered, I feel like it was pretty mild when compared to what everybody else was going through, when compared to the anguish, the mental anguish, the anxiety, the PTSD, the loss of life, the grief, compared to what everybody else was going through at home. I walked away feeling immensely guilty. My family was gathered that day to say goodbye to me and my wife and my kid because we were getting ready to move to Germany. I know it doesn't make sense for me to feel responsible for what happened, but I think it's just the reality of this experience. They were there because of me. Everybody is still at home suffering because of what happened, and I can't be there to be with them. And that's not fair. That day was supposed to be something beautiful. I saw my daughter playing with aunts and uncles that I played with when I was her age, in the same yard I played with, at the same park I played in. And it was ruined. And it became the worst day of our lives. Daisy still carries the trauma with her. She still barely sleeps alone. She knows more about death than most kids her age. She used to ask about Miss Monroe all the time. She was a big part of Daisy's life. Now I think Daisy focuses a little more on asking about her uncles. where they are now. Do I miss them? She asks about her Aunt Jessie and her cousins and if they're doing okay. She's curious about what happened, but Miss Monroe is becoming less and less part of the conversation, which is how it should be. It brings me a bit of comfort to see that she is still strong, empathetic, and curious, despite what Miss Monroe did to her. I am beyond tired of carrying the guilt and trauma inflicted on me that day. This has been an open wound for a long time, and I'm choosing now to move on. I will continue my career in service of our country and do my best to honor John and Dan. I will give everything I have to building myself up, being the best father, husband, brother, uncle, cousin, son, etc. that I can be. I'll raise my daughter to be caring and responsible. I'll make sure that she knows she's loved, and again, to the defendant, to Miss Monroe. My door is open if you want to know more, but I'm not holding my breath and I'm moving on. Thank you to the court for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ash.
Your Honor, next we have Lucy Harris, mother of Dan Harris.
Afternoon, Mrs. Harris.
Your Honor, Judge Barkman. First, before I speak, I'd like to thank the court, Deb and Tony, the prosecutor's office, all the Clinton County Police Force here in the court, and the responders, also the emergency crews who took our families to the hospital, people who stopped to help. Words cannot express what everyone did. What a kindness in spite of the tragedy. Thank you, everybody. I am Lucy Harris, mother of Daniel Harris, who was killed on May 18th, 2024. The call I received that Dan is dead still echoes in my head. How can my Danny, my third son, my baby boy, be gone, leaving a hole in my heart and the hearts of George, Danny's pop, and his brothers, Ash and Andy, and all our family. Danny died, his wife Jessica critically injured, injuries that required her leg to be amputated. 3 of their 4 children, my grandchildren, injured and hospitalized. Jessica's brother John died. John's wife Erica injured. Jessica's brother David and wife Monica, daughter Daisy, all injured. And many of Jessica's Ash family members. Seeing and finding out how many injuries in the family was heartbreaking. From a day of fun and happiness for them to tragedy and misery because of the senseless act of a person who chose to drink and drive. What goes on here today will never bring our Danny back, or John. I am blessed to have the love and support of my husband George, my sons Ash and Andy, and their wives and children. I am so thankful Jessica is here in my life, along with Aurora, Gabe, Henry, and Ivan. Our family is blessed that we have forged a bond with the Esch family. Jessica's mom, Dee, and I both lost our baby boys, young men, loving husbands, Danny, a wonderful father, fatherhood and John's future, all taken away. The love and comfort of our families through shared memories help us to carry on the legacy of Danny and John. My thanks to all the Esch family. Through all this, I have had the privilege to get to know Erica and her family. My sadness and grief will never go away. I have the support of family, friends in my church. Danny's presence is alive in our home. Pictures from baby to man. Danny's music. I hear him singing. I see his artwork. I miss his wit and her humor. My belief in God is where I find comfort. Danny was a treasured son, brother, brother-in-law, uncle, nephew, cousin. Danny was a husband, father-in-law, son-in-law, brother-in-law, and relation to all Jessica's family. Danny had many friends, schoolmates, Boy Scouts, college friends. He valued his clients, and many became his friends. He is missed. And finally, I did not see my son close his eyes or hear his last faint sigh. I only heard that he was gone. Too late to say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Harris. Aurora, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Judge Barkman. My name is Aurora Harris. I am 17 years old, and I was 16 when we were hit. I was Dan Harris's daughter. I called him Pop. I was also John Esch's niece. He was my uncle on my mom's side. And I was one of the people hit by Miss Monroe. I have pretty vivid memories of the day we were hit. I remember walking to the park with my family and standing next to my younger cousins on the side of the road, a train I picked up from my pop. He'd always walk on the side of the sidewalk closest to the road in order to protect me or my brothers or Mom from any incoming cars that might have hit us. I remember playing at the park with my cousins and having this realization that I was the cool older cousin I always looked up to when I was their ages. I remember pushing my little cousins on the swings and laughing. I remember walking up the hill towards the road right beside my mom and pop. The last memory I have that day before blacking out was one of my cousins, Daisy Esch, being called her first, middle, and last name by my uncle David Esch, and laughing. The next thing I knew, I was on the ground on my back. I remember hearing my Aunt Monica telling me not to move, though I was still pretty out of it. I remember everything hurting. I even remember the feel of the grass against my injuries. One of my first thoughts when I heard the words "we'd been hit" was, did we get hit by a bomb? Because I'd somehow ended up flat at my back at the bottom of the hill. I remember being loaded into the ambulance where I was in and out of consciousness. I remember my clothes being cut off and being put in a hospital gown, after which I started to really become aware of the situation and realized that it wasn't a dream, that it was real. I sustained several injuries from being hit. My knee was injured to the point of needing several months of physical therapy in order to walk without a walker. I sustained a severe concussion that had me throwing up for the first week after being hit and left me unable to look at screens or light without having severe migraines, had road rash covering the entirety of the front of my left arm, and somehow ended up with a gash on my upper right thigh that left me with a nasty scar that is around 4 to 6 inches long and required stitches in order to heal. When we were hit and my pop and uncle were killed, I lost a lot. I lost the only real father figure I'd had in my life when my pop died. He was my dad, even if we weren't related by blood. He was there despite our differences, despite my flaws, and despite the chaos that came with our family. He stayed when my biological father threatened him. He stayed through my being manipulated by my biological father, and he stayed through every mental breakdown I had as a result. He never blamed me for what I was manipulated to say or do by my biological father. And when I finally came forth with some of what I'd went through at my biological father's hands, that was one of the few times I'd ever seen Pop cry. He was always strong, but hearing that I was abused, both physically and sexually, on top of the mental abuse, I think that broke something in him. But he was there for me. He never called me impure or anything. He was never disgusted by me. He loved me despite my flaws and emotional baggage. On that note, there were a lot of things I wanted my pop to be able to see and do with me. If and when I were to ever get married, I wanted him to walk me down the aisle. I wanted him to be there at my high school graduation, right at the front where he could see me. I wanted him to see me go through college and law school to become a lawyer, and if I ever had kids, I wanted to see him be the best grandpa to them. Because I know he would have been amazing. But I'll never get any of that. I could never be walked down the aisle by my dad. I could never see him at my graduation. I can never tell him how he helped me to push myself to become an incredible person, and I'll never get to see him become a grandpa. This was stolen from me. All because Miss Monroe couldn't call an Uber or have her friend drive her home. Our home feels empty without my pop. Even if he spent a good chunk of the day working in his office, I could still hear him, be it through the clacking of his keyboard, the clicking of his mouse, or the sound of him strumming his guitar. Sometimes he'd get one of the guitars out and play songs, and sometimes I'd join in and sing. One of my favorite memories with him is a few years back when it was just me, him, and my baby brother Ivan at home, and he brought his guitar out and played some songs where I looked over his shoulder at the lyrics and sang along. I miss having moments like that with him. I miss being able to knock on his office door and show him some drawing I'd done or a new character I created and tell him about their backstory. Sometimes we'd sit at the table and draw together or in the quiet or with some music playing. I miss his stupid dad jokes and dry, sarcastic sense of humor, which I definitely inherited from him. Pop's not the only one I miss, though. I miss my Uncle John a lot, just as much as my pop. My Uncle John was an incredible guy all around, and I had a special bond with him. I could talk with him about anything I wanted, free of judgment. I could have my mom call him, and assuming he wasn't in the middle of something, I could just vent to him. My brother Gabriel and I were actually going to go to his house for a weekend over the summer. We also had a lot of similar interests. I loved being able to talk with him about Pokemon or The Legend of Zelda or whatever anime I was into. In fact, the last gift my Uncle John ever gave me was a charm bracelet with Pokemon on it, another being his copy of an older Pokemon game. I can talk with other people about Pokemon, and I can talk with other people about anime, but it just isn't the same. He was something special to me. He was kind of my backup dad. If anything were to have happened to Pop, I would have turned to him for advice and guidance and support. But he was killed too. He was stolen from us. Due to the combined trauma of being hit by a car and losing my dad and uncle, I have developed severe depression and anxiety that has impacted my day-to-day life. I barely draw once or twice a month, if at all, compared to my weekly, at the very least, drawing before. I hardly read at all now, even with an entire shelf of books that I love. I can't listen to certain songs that remind me of my pop or Uncle John without crying. I can't watch certain anime without breaking down due to the fact that I used to talk with my Uncle John about them. Because, beyond my loss of interest, my anxiety has taken control of me. I constantly second-guess my choices even when playing video games. I worry about the safety of my mom and brothers when they leave the house. Even if they're even a few minutes late to come home, I start to panic and think that they might have gotten in a car crash or something. I even worry about my own safety when in a car with people I trust. I could hardly look at a car without panicking for the first little while after being hit, which was difficult given that I had to be driven to physical therapy 2 or 3 times a week. I remember when my mom was in the hospital, and then when she came home, and when she went back to the hospital, and came home again, and then went back. This was one of the most stressful periods of time for me. I didn't know if my mom was going to be okay or if she was going to have to lose her leg or what. All I knew was that my mom had a bone infection that could have taken her life at any moment. My grandma had to move in with us to take care of us, and she has 2 dogs that she had to leave home alone for the majority of the day because of it. It was chaos, and I do not miss that point in time whatsoever. I don't miss worrying about whether my mom was going to lose her leg or even her life. I don't miss having no actual stability, and I certainly don't miss having to try and play mom to my little brothers in her absence. In short, I miss my pop, I miss my Uncle John, and I miss my old life. I wish Miss Monroe had just called an Uber or a friend or her boyfriend to drive her home instead of choosing to drive while drunk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jessica Harris.
Mrs. Harris, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Jessica Harris. On May 18th, 2024, I was a wife to Dan, big sissy to John, mom to Aurora, Gabe, Henry, and Ivan, sister, aunt, cousin, and niece to others hurt that day. Today, my life looks very different. I may look healthy and strong standing before you, but inside I'm falling to pieces. I miss my husband and little brother every minute of every day. It feels like there's a black hole in my chest that could swallow me up at any moment. And I haven't even really started the grief process. In fact, writing my victim statement and preparing to read it has been exceptionally difficult. It's almost impossible to put into words the amount of pain that one person's choice has caused. Fortunately, I kept a journal, and I'd like to read some of the pieces of those entries. I've had really bad nerve pain for a couple hours, and this nerve pain, it felt like my foot was being dipped in acid. It was unbearable. I noticed that when the boys hugged me goodnight, the pain went away. Yesterday, I had to call the credit card company to tell them that my husband is deceased. I felt like I got punched in the chest. I could hardly function the rest of the night. I just finally got home from the hospital this evening. I have an infection in my leg. Everything hurts. My whole body hurts. I just want Dan here. I'm so tired of nurses and doctors. I want Dan, but I can't have him ever again. Dan was the completion of me. I have to go through the rest of this life as half a person. So this next entry was Henry's 8th birthday. Henry couldn't sleep. He's been crying. He misses his papa. He said, right now, I want to throw something worse than rotten tomatoes at the lady who hit us. I tell him right now she's in jail, and hopefully that's where she'll be for the rest of her life. And he said, I don't think that'll be enough. I keep hoping and waiting to wake up from this nightmare. It's been almost 6 months and everything still feels unreal. Dan and I built a life in spite of so many challenges. Our life was so good. He was so good to me and the kids. He loved us so hard and we loved him so much back. The life I had with him felt like a dream. We talked about that a lot, how it almost felt unreal to have found each other. Sometimes I wonder if I dreamed him up, but I know I didn't. I saw his lifeless body. I can still see the sheet covering his head and feel his refrigerator cold arm in my hands. I've never had a nightmare feel so real. I'd still love to wake up if I could. Just a week or two before the crash, I remember feeling so optimistic about the future. We just bought our first house in a city that felt like home. The kids were doing well, Dan's business was doing well, and I was feeling emotionally strong. I remember walking through the park, holding Dan's hand, which always felt soft yet strong. Seeing the sun shine in his big green eyes and telling him, I know I can get through anything with you by my side. I don't have that now. So for 515 days, Miss Monroe has been incarcerated. But for 515 days, I fought for my life. I fought to keep my children emotionally stable. I fought to understand how this could happen. I've fought with God. I've yelled at him over and over, why did you take them away from me? Because I blame God, because I can't possibly find it in my heart to understand how a person could do something so horrible. Dan and John were really two of the world's best men. They were so full of love for others. They made life joyful, and life feels hollow without them. There's no more hey sissy when I call John. The house is quiet without Dan filling it with music and dad jokes. They were our biggest support and fantastic examples to my kids, and I don't say that lightly. They also gave really great hugs. On May 18th, 2024, I joined my family to celebrate my brother's new job. I was fortunate to spend time with the most important people in my life, and that was all taken away by one person's choices. I was happy with my life, and I was looking forward to so much. I'm no longer a wife to Dan. I'm a widow. I'm no longer a sister to John. I'm bereaved. I'm no longer a happy, normal woman. I'm an amputee, and I will never be able to live a normal life again. Never. The biggest point that I would like to leave this court with today is that we had no choice in what happened to us on May 18th, 2024. Miss Monroe did. This was no accident, as it was 100% preventable. Thank you.
Your Honor, that is the last victim statement.
Thank you. Does the prosecution wish to allocate before sentencing?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Over the past year and a half, my staff at my office and myself have had the honor of meeting and getting to know all the members of the family that were struck that day. And we've had to have the most impossible decisions with them about initial charges, if we should run a preliminary examination and ask Judge Clarizio at the time to send the case up on murder, if we should have a trial, consulting with them on what kind of offer, if any, should be extended to the defendant. And I want this court to know, even though today technically is about the sentencing of the defendant, that that family over there has acted with nothing but grace and love, and are truly an example of how families should treat each other when the unthinkable happens. I wish I'd never met these people under these circumstances. I really wish it had been other circumstances, because there are people there that are such good humans. And it really makes you wonder, and I've dealt with a lot of crime, a lot of horrific things that have happened to people in their lives. Why, when something like this happens, does it happen to people like that? And I thought of all the people, and I was taking note when they were speaking, of all the people there that day. A first grade teacher, a mom, a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 2-year-old, a dad, a grandma, an aunt, a wife, a newlywed, an EMT firefighter, a young doctor, a military veteran, and people who loved each other. I was not there on May 18th, 2024, but I will tell you, I know you've just heard a lot of statements from a lot of people who were there. And I want them to know that there was another side that day, because when I first got the call as the on-call prosecutor that weekend, it was from a seasoned member of the Clinton County Sheriff's Office to tell me that this had just happened in Clinton County. And I have never, in 25 years of practicing law, 15 years of being a prosecutor, had an officer call me, and when they were telling me what happened, break down during that call. And the reason he broke down was because of the kids, the children that were there and saw what happened. And right in that moment, even though I didn't fully understand the magnitude of what was happening in our county, I knew that this was something so horrific that it had rattled someone with that seniority. The victims, their family, their friends, their supporters, their colleagues have shared so much with this court about who John and Dan were, about how their lives have been impacted. And there's some people who questioned the agreement for the 30-year minimum on this. And I know that was an impossible decision for the family of Dan and John to make. And I want to be clear that that is the minimum sentence. That is the Killebrew agreement. That is what we stand by today, that she not be eligible for parole for 30 years. And I hope she reflects on this, she understands that this isn't something that happened to her. This isn't something bad luck that happened to Ashley Monroe that day. That's not fate. That's not none of that. This happened to them, not her. She made multiple choices that day, and although the drinking and driving has been mentioned multiple times, and that's certainly a large part of it here, because we know from her blood results that she was a .195, keep in mind we're not here on operating while intoxicated causing death. The primary plea here, which carries the maximum sentence that she can get today, is murder in the second degree. And that is because choices were made here where this was foreseeable. This wasn't just operating while intoxicated causing death. This is drinking to a .195, along with the choice of being on medications that say not to drink at all. And even though they say not to drink at all, she didn't have 1 drink or 2 drinks. She drank to .195. It is the choice of driving in that car, getting behind the wheel, continuing to drive for about 2 miles down Wacusta Road, going off the road to the right, going into opposing traffic on the left in no passing zones over hilly areas, doing that multiple times and not making the right choice at any time to pull over her car and stop. I had the opportunity to go to the scene where all of our survivors and our victims were hit. I walked that scene, and what struck me the most looking at what's there is this is clearly a park area. This happened in daylight. This happened in a space where a driver would reasonably be able to see that going through that section of the roadway, they should be exercising reasonable caution based on what is on that road, what is around it. There was plenty of space to see. The number of people that were there, dressed in bright colors, standing there in the middle of the day. We have evidence from Monica Fabice that when she was coming towards the guardrail where this family stood, she wasn't even looking out her windshield. She was looking straight down. What was she doing? Some people have guessed maybe on a phone. Some people have guessed who knows what. But she wasn't looking at the road. So with medications, alcohol, not looking at the road, swerving all over the road, and not making a choice out of the multiple times she did that to pull over, she made choices. As one of the victims pointed out, multiple choices. And those choices took choices away from these good people back here. This isn't something that happened to her. It happened to them. And I have heard things about, of course, she doesn't have any convictions on her record for prior criminal acts. And I get that. I do. And I know the court has to consider that. But there is a difference here between intent and impact. And when the court looks at the snow factors, part of what the sentence has to be is deterrence. I don't have a time machine, I know this court certainly doesn't, to turn it back and bring Dan and John back, to bring back Jessica's leg, to bring back all the trauma they've been through. But the court can say to the community, this will not be tolerated because the sheer damage that it does to the citizens who live here, who visit here, who are here, there has to be a message sent to others in the community that when you make choices like the defendant did, the penalty is going to be severe. The consequences are going to be severe. 30 years probably isn't enough. It's not. But when you have these impossible conversations about going to trial with a jury and seeing what a jury does, it was the decision that was right at the time. I also want to say, after meeting this amazing family, that there may be things that they do not know from that day about miracles. And I do believe that in some situations when we have a case like this, we have to have accident reconstructionists who put together what happened and try to tell the prosecution or the court or the defense attorneys what exactly happened. And there were some miracles this day. One miracle I want to say is there was a person on scene who was one of the first people to stop. His name was Jeff Hinkle. He hasn't testified in anything so far. He's a member of the community. He was an off-duty EMT, and he stopped, and law enforcement told me that but for Mr. Hinkle, this would have been a worse situation than it was. Mr. Hinkle got out of his car, stopped, and immediately took control of the scene, even coming up to the first officer who arrived there and was able to tell him who needed treatment immediately and what was going on. The fact that he was the first person who just happened to stop that day is simply amazing. Second, defendant left the scene. We know from Gabe, who is the young man, you can't see him on our screen, but he's the young man in the group picture far to the left, that when she was driving away after hitting his family member, she had her hand over her mouth. She knew that she had just hit many people, and she kept going. She left them there, no better than trash, no better than roadkill, no better than a piece of litter she threw out her window. She put her own well-being, her own self-preservation among her fellow human beings who she just hurt. Perhaps the only way she was actually apprehended, and we know who did this, and we're able to be here today, is because of some miracle of the universe, 2 deputies from the Clinton County Sheriff's Office who were coming to the scene and were in the right place at the right time, taking a route they normally actually wouldn't have taken but for the fact that one officer was training another, passed her vehicle on a 2-lane highway, going, I think they said about 100 miles per hour to try to get to the scene, and one of them, out of the corner of their eye, saw the far side of her windshield flash in the light and realize it was damaged. They immediately turned on that car and were able to stop her. And even after she was still going down that road when the deputies found her, dropping pieces of her car along the road, driving off the road still, they were able to identify her and connect her to this horrible event that just happened. The fact that they were where they were off their route is amazing. Another miracle. A lot of times, unfortunately, with these kind of incidents, we don't have witnesses who are not involved who saw what happened. I want the court to be aware that there were people, even though the defendant didn't stop, there were people minding their own business that day at the park or near the park that came and did everything they could. Several people who were there, I think one was kayaking, had just finished kayaking, stopped and gave statements to police. They came and testified at the preliminary hearing. These people who also, based on the horrific nature of what they witnessed because they saw the impact, are also going through their own counseling. They didn't walk away. In fact, the humanity of Miss Temez, she saw Jennifer Evans, who was our first speaker, get launched. Jennifer went the farthest out of all the victims. She was sent away from the group. And her first thought was to get to Jennifer because she was worried that no one else, that the first responders wouldn't know that she was over there that far. And when she testified and when I spoke to her, she said exactly what Jennifer said. The first thing when Jennifer became conscious was she asked about her little girls, who are those 2 little girls in the bottom right corner, who by some miracle are alive. I don't think Jennifer remembers this because I think she was in shock, but Natalia was there encouraging her to stay awake during that time while everyone else was with the main group. I also want to thank Leanne Miller, who testified at the prelim, who was in the car behind the defendant, who testified about what she observed. She also stopped her car. Miss Miller, the first person that Miss Miller saw was little Ivan, who you can't see on here, but in the group picture, he is the little boy being held by Jessica. He was the only family member who was still in the road. Everyone else got thrown over the guardrail. Ivan was still on the side of the road by himself. She went to him and comforted him, a 3-year-old face down, offering him water, trying to put something under his head, take care of him. His dad had just been killed, unbeknownst to her, and his mom didn't even know if she was going to survive. The two biggest miracles of that day. Number one is that Jessica Harris survived. When this case first came out, and I was evaluating the law regarding second-degree murder for John and Dan, there was a time when the people were thinking this may be 3 murder counts. And whatever strength of will is in that woman brought her through the immense pain, suffering, and injuries to survive for those children so that they didn't lose both parents that day. And then finally, although I didn't know John or Dan, when I listened to the statements of their loved ones, and when I read, I know we gave you multiple other letters, Your Honor, from other people who loved, knew, and cared about these 2 men. The fact that statistically, based on the people that were in that group, most of them were children. The fact that we are not here on murder charges for children is simply astounding from a statistical standpoint. And maybe it's a miracle, but I also know after listening to what these 2 men are, that if 2 people had to die that day, it wasn't going to be a kid, and it wasn't going to be who they loved. And so when I hear their loved ones talk about them being protectors and caring about other people, I can almost guarantee you, without knowing them, that they would have been the 2 first people to sacrifice themselves for the rest of their family. And so it's not lost on me that the 2 people that were lost out of this incident are these 2 men, because they would have given that for them. I want to thank all the police jurisdictions because as I prepared this case and talked to the officers who, as John's department pointed out, they worked very hard on this case. One officer told me, in fact, that he will never forget this case because as soon as the call came out that multiple people were injured, that it was a fatality, and that there were a lot of kids involved, that the radio did not stop beeping with all the departments from all the areas who started coming lights and sirens to help. And he said, I will never forget that. You couldn't get through. There wasn't a department in the area that was not on their way to provide help for this family. All in all, it doesn't change that John and Dan are gone. It doesn't change the injuries and the sentence that this family has gotten, that they were sentenced to on May 18th. But we ask that you send the message to the community that defendant be held responsible for her choices that day, because this was murder, that she be responsible for the number of lives she's impacted that will carry on, as someone pointed out, generationally for this side and this side. That even though today might be the last day of the court proceedings before you, it's not the last day for this family. And we ask that, Your Honor, you follow the Killebrew Agreement, that she be sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, with the top of that number to be set by Your Honor, but we ask that it be no less than 60 years.
Ms. Martinez, I have a question
Sure.
for you. I just want to make sure that my math is correct, because I know this was a carefully crafted
Correct.
plea agreement between the prosecution and the defense. So as to the, and I'm looking at the homicide murder second degree guidelines, I read 225 months to 375 months to life. So my calculations indicate that would be on the lowest end 18 years and approximately 18 3/4 years.
Correct.
So 18 years and about 9 months. And then on the higher end of the minimum guidelines, that would be 31.
Correct.
Okay, so that would be, so the 30-year would be within the properly
Correct.
scored guidelines, and I don't think there was any dispute.
Correct, Your
Right,
Honor.
and that was, okay, I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Monroe, the criteria and the reasons for the sentence is the nature and the gravity of this offense, the punishment or discipline to you that is appropriate, the potential for your rehabilitation or reformation, the protection of society and deterrence against you or someone else committing this offense again. First of all, I would like to thank all of the individuals from the family who spoke today, everyone, and I'll just briefly recap what each person said. Ms. Evans testified about the fear that she had when she realized she had been involved in this accident for herself, for her daughters. Ms. Pack, who bravely came up and spoke about, again, her fears with this terrible incident. Captain Tiefel, who spoke on behalf of Firefighters Union, talking about losing a brother that day in John, and he made a statement that was particularly poignant to this court. He said, this is from the captain, that you, Ms. Monroe, took away someone who would have moved heaven and earth to help people. And that was his brother, his firefighter brother, John, who worked as a paramedic, and as we've heard his wife and other people talk about, really seemed to connect with the most vulnerable people in society and really fight on their behalf to make sure that those people were properly cared for medically when they themselves were having their own issues. And Ms. Monroe, it sounds as if had the situation been different, and he would have cared for you too in that incident. We heard from Dr. Blatz, the widow of John, who, again, she talked about how her husband would sit and talk with patients that he dealt with as a paramedic, who offered no judgment to those people, who even if those people who were constantly slipping in and out of addiction, needing the services of emergency medical personnel, and yet he would still tend to those individuals, as was his obligation and his job, and frankly, as Dr. Glatz indicated, his desire as a paramedic professional to help the community in the manner he did. We heard from Mrs. Ash, John's mom, who talked about the kindness of her son and how he cared for others, and that was exemplified in everyone's statements today about John and Dan, and how again this family has lost such a great deal in losing these two men, and having other members of the family, including the youngest members, be injured, and what it sounds like facing a long and painful road to recovery. We heard from Ms. Fabrice, who talked about her 2-year-old who had to endure and is apparently still going through the symptoms of PTSD, who had to seek out counseling, who the family has had some challenges with depression and feeling like they themselves were responsible for this. Since the day that this happened, they were gathered to say goodbye to their family, their small family, who was taking another job overseas. And we heard from Mr. Ash, from John's brother, who really eloquently said, in addressing you, Ms. Monroe, what you're getting today is nothing like what our relatives have been going through for the past 515 days. So in other words, the sentence today, and I think other family members said this, this family is going to have to live with the memories of this terrible, terrible, tragic day for the rest of their lives, whether it's from their own memories of the incident, of the crash, of themselves, their family being injured and killed. A number of these family members have talked about reliving those moments in their lives and not being able to see a day where they don't either experience the physical pain or the mental pain of reliving those moments. Mr. Esch also talked about the fact that again, the powerlessness of himself not being able to help some of the victims, while his wife, on the other hand, was performing CPR in a failed attempt to revive her brother-in-law. And again, I think that it went without saying that this was one of the best days. This day started out as one of the best days in this family's lives. Family traveling from out of state, from out of the area to meet, to say goodbye for now to Monica and David, who would be moving overseas, and their young daughter, enjoying time outside in the sun. And I do remember that this was a beautiful day outside. They were gathered in the park to enjoy, and I think someone said playing in the same playground that some of the family members played in when they were young children, and just enjoy each other's company. And it became the worst day of this family's life. We heard from Mrs. Harris, Dan's wife, who talked again about her own horrific injury, her own struggle for survival. We heard the prosecution say they originally thought this might be a 3-count homicide case, but through her own persistence and desire to carry forward despite her husband's death, she survived. And we heard her struggles, and we heard Aurora's elocution about losing her dad. Well, we heard again statements from the family, and I'm just compiling them here. They will never be able to live normal lives again. And at the end, once all the family members had made their statement, the prosecution, Ms. Martinez, said she has wondered, why do things like this happen to people like this? People that were just out enjoying their time together. And really, I don't think there's a good answer to it. But what we do know is that Ms. Monroe, the defendant in this case, made what I understand to be the worst choice that she's ever made in her life. She made the choice to, while on prescription medication, consume a very large amount of alcohol, to the point where her blood alcohol level was, as has been stated, 0.195, way more than anyone should be consuming, and then making the choice to step behind the wheel of a vehicle and then operate that vehicle and unfortunately crash into this family. And I agree with Ms. Martinez's sentiments that many miracles happened this day, and it is a miracle that we are not here mourning the losses of more of these family members. And it's funny because Ms. Martinez also talked about the fact that out of all of the family members that were present for this, again, what should have been a joyous gathering of these family members, the two people who perished, from what the family has stated about those two people, those are the two people that would have sprung into action to protect their kids, their nieces, their nephews, their wives, their mothers, and you know, I guess, and I of course didn't know any of these people personally, but from the statements made, they displayed acts of heroism that again most likely reduced this incident from something that could have been even more tragic than it already is. So again, Ms. Monroe, I'm sure that if you could dial back this incident, and you know, you didn't make a statement, and I don't hold that against you in any way, but I'm sure that if you could dial back this incident, you would. But unfortunately you can't, and as all of these individuals, all of these family members said, they are going to have to deal with and the consequences and the ramifications of your actions for the rest of their lives. And I don't know that there's an explanation for what happened other than your choices that day. But I do know that something like this cannot happen again. Not here in this community, not here in Clinton County, not here in the state of Michigan, not ever. And so I do need to sentence you to a sentence that will not allow that to ever happen, not allow you to make these same choices again. I have reviewed the recommendation that's been provided to this court from the Michigan Department of Corrections. I believe it is in line with what the plea agreement is. And once again, I note that your sentencing guidelines permit me to sentence you from somewhere between 18 years to 31 years on the minimum, up to a longer term. And the recommendation provided to me by the Michigan Department of Corrections accounts for, yes, your criminal history, which you do not have any criminal history to speak of, but it also accounts for the horrific acts that occurred on this day on May 18th, 2024. And their recommendation for the homicide murder second degree charge is 30 years to 60 years with credit for 515 days served. And I intend to follow that recommendation. So as to the count 9 homicide murder second degree, I sentence you to the Michigan Department of Corrections for a period of 30 years to 60 years with credit for 515 days served. You must pay the court costs in the amount of $350. You must comply with DNA testing and pay a $60 fee as ordered. You must pay a $68 state cost. And this will be served concurrently with all of the other counts. This is count 1 through 8 of operating while intoxicated, causing serious injury. You will serve that sentence in the Michigan Department of Corrections for a period of 2 years to 5 years with credit for 515 days served. Those counts will be served concurrently with each other and concurrently with the second degree homicide sentence that I just handed down. You will not have any verbal, written, electronic, or physical contact with any of the victims in this particular case, and all of the victims' names are listed in the pre-sentence investigation report. You will not have that direct contact or be within 500 feet of their residence, school, or place of employment. You must pay restitution the amount of $73,128.44. $66,093.44 will be payable to Auto Club Insurance Association. $7,035 will be payable to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and you must execute a wage assignment to pay restitution if you are employed and miss 2 regularly scheduled payments. You must pay $544 in state costs, comply with DNA testing, and pay attorney fees as ordered. And these fees will be determined. So I want to say one more thing as to your sentence with the Michigan Department of Corrections. This does not, again, not to minimize any of the family members who came in here and talked about the fact that for the rest of their lives they will relive the moments of this tragedy. But Ms. Monroe, I know you are going to a place, and I noticed in your pre-sentence investigation report, and I also noticed, but based on some of the certificates that you presented the court, that you do have, and I think it's obvious, a substance abuse issue that is the reason, one of the reasons why this terrible thing happened. I implore you to take advantage of any possible rehabilitation that might be offered to you within the correctional facility that you will be sent to, and you have a long time to serve, and I implore you to serve it wisely by making sure that this never happens again, and that no one else, and that this sentence deters anyone else from engaging in this type of reckless conduct. So with that said, you will be handed a document that notifies you that if you wish to appeal this sentence, you may do so by sending one copy of the document to the address listed on the form no later than 42 days from today. The other copy of the form, it's the same form, 2 copies, will be returned to me, and I'll place it in the court file. And I would ask you to initial that copy. Do you need to address anything else from the people?
Just briefly, Your Honor.
Sure.
Mr. Felposh from the Department of Corrections just notified me that in addition that.
Yes, Your Honor. I noticed it was omitted for the crime victims assessment, $130. It's mandatory.
Okay, that will be included then.
Thank you.
$130 for the crime victim.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Anything else that we need to address from the defense?
Your Honor, we'll just acknowledge receipt of the notice of appellate rights, and the client initial and date that and provided it back to the court. She's receiving her copy now. Nothing additional from defense.
All right, thank you very much. We are adjourned.